emotional violence or neglect. And these are statistics that are coming from household surveys. This is data that we didn't have 5-10 years ago, and now we have data that we're collecting, and I think it's important for everyone to know. 1 out of 4 children in the world suffers from physical abuse. 1 in 4 girls has suffered from sexual abuse before the age of 18, and 1 in 13 boys have suffered sexual abuse. And then homicide is among the top 5 causes of death in adolescence. And then we're going to all the much more serious consequences linked to violence. But I think these are very important statistics for every single person in the world to remember. And we're speaking of every country in the world, rich, high income, middle income, low income, east, west, all around the world. The second important slide, which I want to share with you, is the consequences of violence. Again, I don't know many public health problems that have so many so many long-lasting consequences. So we see, of course, the direct effect of violence, which can be fractures, head injury, internal injuries, the mental health problems in blue, depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorders, suicide, the maternal and child health issues, which we heard about earlier, of course, death, pregnancy complications, behavior changes related to violence, which lead to multiple partners, alcohol and drugs, unsafe sexual practices, and these in turn can lead to, indirectly, non-communicable diseases such as heart diseases, cancer, diabetes, alcohol, obesity. So these are just 2 slides to give you a bit of context on what the Global Partnership to End Violence is working on. As I mentioned, the partnership was launched in 2016. My mother always says I'm way too optimistic, and when she sees these goals, she says, you're really way too optimistic. But our aim is to reach 100 countries, to increase resources to $100 million, and to reach 100 million children within the next 4 years. And the partnership has 3 pillars. The first one is to grow demand for change. We need to make the world aware of this problem. We need to increase the demand of change, of countries, of UN agencies, of all our organizations, and of people, so that they see that it's a problem and that they come to us to demand for change. Within that, I'll talk a little bit more about the Safe to Learn campaign. Then we have to mobilize resources. It's such an underfunded sector. Anybody who's worked in the sector, the Ministry of Social Services is always, oh, it's that little building there with the curtains that are hanging from the wall and that are, so it's a very underfunded sector compared to health, education, transport, and these other issues. So we need to mobilize resources for the sector. And the third pillar is to equip practitioners. We need to increase access to tools and to expertise for practitioners in the field. So within our first pillar, we are launching a Safe to Learn campaign. We realize that schools are really a place where children can learn about violence. I have 3 children, they're 11, 9, and 3. And they have learned everything they know, well, aside from me because I work in the sector, but pretty much everything they know, they've learned it through schools. So it's about programs when they were 6, about what it means, what your body and respect for your body, and then what's important to you, and then it becomes about online violence and bullying. So school is really a good place to learn about violence. Of course, children want and expect to be safe at school. So it's corporal punishment from the teacher to the children, it's bullying in school, but it's also helping them to be kind to each other at school. Violence in schools is a global issue, which is another reason why we're tackling this. It happens in every country from Sweden and Switzerland to Namibia and India. So this is really an issue that's bringing everyone together. We actually have solutions on what works to end violence in and through schools, and I'll talk a little bit about those after. And then for me, this is the most important. Schools offers an entry point for working with families and communities. I really used to think it was through the health sector that we could do this, but more and more, now that we're actually getting children through the MDGs, we're actually getting children with their bums on the chairs in the classrooms, the next step is to start using that as a space where we can actually teach them about nonviolent interaction and violence prevention programs within the schools. So we'll be operating in a select number of countries where we'll be shining the spotlight on the devastating impact that violence has, and we'll be showcasing solutions for ending violence in and through schools. So along with the launch of the partnership in 2016, we launched this tool called Inspire. This was Ban Ki-moon. It was launched with UNICEF Director General and WHO Director General. And Inspire really has, I would say, 5 very important points. It's not just another document that's going to take dust, I promise you. First of all, the organizations came together to work on it. World Health Organization, United Nations Office for Drug and Crime Control, World Bank, PEPFAR, UNICEF, World Health Organization, and they agreed on what are the 7 strategies to end violence against children. Before you would speak to one organization, they would say it's about income generation, and the other one would say, no, it's about family planning, and the other one would say, no, it's about implementing laws. And so it took them about 3 years to develop, but now they're talking about the same 7 strategies to end violence against children. So you'll see each of the letters of INSPIRE is one of the strategies: implementation and enforcement of laws, norms and values, safe environments, parent and caregiver support, income and economic strengthening, response and support services, and education and life skills. So I said there were 4 key elements. The first one is that these organizations came together to work on this. The second one, it's multi-sectoral. We're bringing together health, justice, education, and social services, which is a huge achievement. The third one, it's about prevention, much more than just response. Only the R of INSPIRE is about response. And the last one is that there's a lot, we actually can showcase solutions now. One of the solutions that we showcase, for example, in the Education and Life Skills program is a reduction of 25% of violence for all children in a socio-emotional training. It was a life skills training with, I think, 5,000 children, and there was a reduction of 25% of violence when it was for all students, and when it was for selected students, it was minus 33%. I'm just going to skip, this is another guidance that's coming out on how to end violence in and through schools, being developed by WHO, UNESCO, and UNICEF. But I also want to take some time to discuss the youth talks that UNICEF launched in a few years ago, which is really giving a space for children to speak up all around the world. So they're organizing student roundtables, talk shows, and town halls. And it really gives a chance for children to raise awareness about the types of violence that they're experiencing locally, to elevate their voices, and to produce recommendations for how to end violence in and through schools, and to ask for support to end it. So UNICEF came together with the World Council of Churches to not only do this in school settings, but also to do this in other settings such as Sunday schools, church-run schools, etc. They've worked in countries from Chile, DRC, India, Kenya, Jamaica, Nigeria, Philippines, South Africa, and Uruguay. And linked to this, they developed a social media campaign where they received over 1 million inputs on what students want to end violence against children through schools. This will be coming together in a youth manifesto, which will be launched in Johannesburg on the 1st of December as part of the Mandela 100 Festival. So if you don't remember anything else, I think 3 very important things for me. 1, there's a movement to end violence against children. It's happening, and we really hope that you can be part of it. Secondly, preventing violence against schools is really possible. There's evidence, there's solutions, and we know how to do it now. So let's all use those solutions. And thirdly, through the youth talks, we see that we really need to create spaces for youth to talk up, because if we hear it from the children and youth, those are the ones that will be able to change it. I now want to give it back to you, Isabel, to introduce the children, right?
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine. We've learned a lot, from your presentation. And before I introduce the children, I just want to say a few words. First is just to acknowledge that indeed there is violence in the schools. And I remember in the 70s, my younger sister was bitten by a snake, and she spent 1 year in the hospital recovering. And then she went back to school. Her mind was very sharp, and we ended up in the same class, even though I was, okay in my body, but, she was on crutches. And then the teacher was teaching, and she asked her a question which she did not answer well, and the teacher hit her and broke her arm. And here is a girl who is on crutches, and her hand has been broken by the teacher, and therefore she can't go to school because she can't walk. So what we are talking about is passionate to me, because I know the importance of no violence in schools against children. But I have to talk about the WCC. I have to talk about what has happened in the WCC since the UNICEF suggested we collaborate on ending violence in the schools. I think the most important thing for us to know is that, church-run schools make a large percentage of educational institutions worldwide. This is especially true in the global south, where the establishment of churches went hand in hand with establishment of schools, hospitals, agricultural projects, and printing press. Although governments have taken over the provision of education in most of these countries, up to now, in the global south, churches still own most of the excellent schools. And I am an example of one of those people who went to a Roman Catholic church secondary school. Second point, the WCC, through its member churches, has a very large network of counterparts managing pre-primary, primary, secondary school, and universities worldwide. And from Masimba's presentation, we also heard about how committed our churches are to promote education, but also protection of children from violence. We have asked some of our children in the schools to test the concept of youth talks on ending violence in the schools. And Sabine has already mentioned the countries where this is being done, and I will not repeat that. While the WCC is excited to be part of these initiatives, we are aware that in many countries, children can be put at risk by just sharing their stories. One of the children who could have been with us would have come from Mozambique. And this child would have shared with us how they need to bribe the teachers in order to remain in school. But then she's not allowed to come and share with us these kind of stories. So whilst we want to be part of this talk, we are mindful of not doing harm to the very children we want to protect. And then I also want to share with you about Jamaica. We had a conference in Jamaica, and it was on the 5th of October. We had a youth talk event as part of our intergenerational conversation on a just community of women and men. The young people from schools in Kingston expressed confidence in the society's ability to prevent violence and reduce the current levels of violence. They all believe the home environment and the wider society needs to demonstrate more compassionate care towards children, and those children will grow up into compassionate, caring adults. They also posited that the church has so far been failing them in being a welcoming place to all persons. They feel the church has been too judgmental and rejecting persons, and such rejection causes harm and cannot help in curbing violence because we are pushing people away instead of embracing them and teaching them how to make better choices. But what I remembered most was the fact that, the children were saying that they know and they accept the responsibility to end violence in schools. So enough about Jamaica. We have our young people here who want to share with us their own experiences of what it means to end violence in the schools. So I want to invite Laura and Jonathan, please, to share with us your own experiences of young people in the schools. Let's start with Laura.
Hello. Hello? Okay, great. So my name is Laura. I'm 18 years old, and I'm currently in my last year of secondary school in the Martin Luther Gymnasium in Eisenach, which is in the very center of Germany. You might have heard about it in the context of Martin Luther and the Reformation. He used to be a student at our school, and he spent some time on the Wartburg to translate the Bible. And yes, so we had one of those youth talks as well during our religious education class, and invited the 11th and the 12th grade to share their experiences together. And so I just collected the most important points that were made during our youth talk. And I think I should first say that I think we're a very privileged school concerning violence, because there's nearly no physical violence at all at our school. And even psychologically, and bullying is very little compared to other German schools, and internationally at the very top, I think. But still, we managed to find a few points that even happen at our school. And it took some time, and at first nobody really thought that it was a problem at our school. But we did find some points. And our theory was that the smaller a school, the more difficult it is to perform violence, because there's no anonymity given. So the smaller, the less students are in a school and in a grade, the less likely it is for other people to bully others. But still, in our school, we experience exclusion from groups, and it's very subtle. It's like in the group finding process, when the teacher says, okay, go find a group, and then there's always a few people that are left out, or being laughed at or ignored. When commenting in class, I think, is a form of violence. Or especially nowadays, of course, cyber violence, because again, in the internet, a certain anonymity is given. It's much easier to say something online, anonymous even, than in person to somebody. So I think these are the main forms of violence that happen in our school. But of course, we're aware that compared to other schools in the world, we're already very privileged.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Hello. Hello. So I study in a private school, so usually we face a lot less physical violence, but comparatively we have a lot of emotional violence. Teachers humiliate us in front of the whole class. For a simple mistake like not getting a parent's sign, you get to kneel down and outside the class for a whole day, and sometimes even in broad sunlight. So, and partiality and favoritism is done by many teachers. So, for example, there's one child who gets, let's say, good grades or gives the teacher some gifts on Teachers' Day. This happens a lot. So that child doesn't get scolded for anything he does. For example, that child can talk in class, that child can move around in class. He won't get scolded, he'll get special attention and care. He sometimes will even get extra credits, so that happens. And bullying and peer threatening. So our school has a lot of children students this size, so bullying is very, very common. So like 7 or 8 children gang up and tease others, for example, based on their looks, appearances, their financial status and all. So, and peer threatening, don't tell this to the teacher or I'll beat you up, or bring me money tomorrow, I'll beat you up. So that's very common. And cyberbullying is not common at all. So I have not seen any cases of cyberbullying. And sexual violence is, I have not seen it in my school, but I've heard about it in my district. So even the teachers and the drivers who transport the children from their homes to the schools do that. So it's very common in my district, not in my school. So, and another thing that the children told me that we don't get enough physical education. So only 2 hours per day, a week. So we get stressed, and all the teachers want 100 out of 100. So they don't. All the teachers do their. All the teachers do their as a job. So they come, they take the books, they write what's on the, they mark the questions, they tell us to study. If we get A+, it's good. If we don't, it's bad. So they don't care if we get knowledge or not. They just care if they get their salary, they do their work, and they stay in the jobs. That's all they care about. So.
Thank you very much for sharing, these difficult experiences, which, as you said, sorry, thank you. That, when we compare with other schools, maybe it may be said that, what we are experiencing is minor, but it's violence in any case. So we need to take your experiences seriously. Please share with us what your group proposed for actions for children. Let's start with Jonathan this time.
Sexual violence and the other violences which are done by the teachers are not told to the parents and are not complained to the management. So we should keep a voice box in all the classes. So even if they don't want to disclose their identity, they can just write anonymously, this teacher did this to me, this happened to me, and they have to open up to their parents. That's very important. And we should create awareness around the whole school and tell everyone what we should do when we are done violence against. So that's all.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Laura?
So a lot of the ideas that we found depend on an authority to grant them and to allow them. But of course, speaking for what you can do as a student is, in our case, for the forms of violence that happen at our school, is, I would say, just reflect upon yourself. And honestly, just ask yourself, am I participating in violence? And in my opinion, that also includes not standing up if you experience it. And talking for myself, I can agree that it's very hard to stand up if you notice it, because you're afraid then to become the next victim or to be left out, and nobody wants that. So yeah, so I experienced that during our youth talks as well, that it's very important that people just are honest and confront themselves and try to really, and it's hard to admit it, but I can definitely say I've been part of it. So yeah, I think that's important. And then of course, if you experience it, then always go talk to a teacher. And I think that's even more important than talking to your parents, because the teachers are the ones who are in charge in school and the ones who can change it.
Okay, thank you. So already you have answered, some of what I wanted to ask in question number 3. It's about actions for adults. You mentioned, that the children must speak to their parents about sexual abuse that, they experience. And you have also talked about, Laura, you talked about the need to talk to the teachers, right? Is there anything more that you want to add in terms of what actions, for adults to undertake to end violence in the schools?
Yes.
Me? Yes.
Okay. So in our school, we offer, we force on the 5th and 6th graders. So the lower classes, our schools range from 5th to 12th grade. And in 5th and 6th grade, in the context of our religious education, we have a week about bullying in school to raise awareness to children and to teach them how to respectfully go on and about with each other. And our religious teacher, who is with me right now, told me a bit about how she does that, because I wasn't at our school in 5th grade, so I haven't experienced it personally, but about how she does that. And we try to transfer that in a playful way. For example, a student who's usually very confident and is more likely to be a bully himself, he's sent out of the room, and the others are involved in a conspiracy against him. So they're not allowed to talk to him, and they're all supposed to hug each other, but as soon as the person enters the room, he's to be ignored. And I think that's a very effective strategy, because for children, I think it's much more effective to show them rather than to just lecture them about something. And in that idea, we also, one student had the idea of inviting former victims to speak about their experience, because it's much more fruitful for children to actually listen to somebody who experienced it rather than a teacher who might understand it but just not transmitted that so successfully. And yeah, these were our ideas to reduce this distance and to make children actually interested towards this topic.
Okay, thank you so much. And what about you, Jonathan?
So I like to add one more thing. In India, we study like 4 syllabuses. One which is in government schools, which is mostly the regional language mediums, and English medium schools with the same kind of books in government schools, and CBSE schools, which is like the national standard, and ICSE schools, which is like the international standard. So there are like 4 syllabuses, and there's this one exam after we finish 12th grade. It's called NEET. It's the National Entrance and Eligibility Test. So to pass that and to get good marks in that, CBSE offers the best chance. So what the government has done is one unified exam for everyone. So this is not effective because 4 different types of people, for example, CBSE students are mostly people who are rich, who travel in cars, who get books and educational things, whatever they want. And those government school children are not like that. They don't even have money to buy slippers. So they save up money, they go in buses and buy some books to study. So these people are told to compete with these people. So if they want to unify the educational system, they need to give the same syllabus in all these schools to keep the same exam in all these schools. That's
okay. Thank you very much. Right. Well, I'll come back to you. I wanted us to watch a video. Is it there from Philippines? No, it's not there. Okay. We thought we were going to watch a video, and I was going to ask you to listen very carefully to the video and then comment on it. But I'm sure you've heard from each other, and I'm wondering, Laura, what do you want to say to Jonathan about what you have heard from him? And the same, Jonathan, what do you want to say to Laura after what you have heard her explain?
Yeah, so I'll start. For me, it was shocking to hear about the different forms and the much more extreme forms of violence that I would say are not likely to happen in any German school. It's just an entirely different standard in Germany, so I can't even imagine what it's like at your school. And I have a question, because this morning at the breakfast table you told me about the size of your classes, and you said that they range from 60 to 120 students in one classroom. And do you think that's something that maybe makes violence easier, and do you have only one teacher for that amount of students?
Yeah, so yeah, because for 60 students, let's say, easily there can be many people who gang up and bully others, so that's very likely to happen if there are many people in one classroom. And but in a classroom like that, the teachers also, or what can I say, they are not, they are imposed to do stuff like that because it's tougher to manage 60 and 120 children at the same time. But the answer is not violence, so that's what I'm saying. So the bigger classes, yeah, it means more violence, because more children means more violence, but we can't stop any of that because we should counsel them. And another thing I want to say is that teachers who punish children, corporal punishments, that is, they shouldn't be punished. What they should be doing is they should be nurtured with care and love. So counseling and telling them what to do and what happens in real life and showing them real life skills and manners is really useful rather than just telling them what to do.
So, from what you are explaining, it looks to me that, the bigger the class, the higher the chances of being bullied.
Yeah.
but also the difficulty it is for the teachers to
Yeah.
monitor what's going on in the classroom. Yeah, and you've raised the issue of punishing, that you're saying teachers should not punish. Laura, do you want to comment on that one?
I definitely agree if it's
Yes.
concerning, I think you meant physical
Yeah.
punishment, right?
Yes.
And is it still legal in India at the moment?
No, but it's still practiced a lot.
Okay. So the teachers are not following the law then?
Yeah.
Okay. Do parents know about it?
Yes. So
Okay.
the mindset of parents is that if the children are punished, they'll become better in their life. So even during the parent-teachers meetings, the teachers blankly ask the parents, "Can I beat your child?" The parents say, "Okay," they agree.
Okay.
So it happens with support of the parents. It doesn't.
That's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Jonathan, do you have a question to Laura from what you've heard her say?
Those violences I think we encounter daily as well, but I don't think they are taken care of in our schools, but I agree that they should be taken care of because every single violence is important and every single violence is violence. So. Nobody complained about these violences in the discussions we had because I think they agreed to, they are like, I don't care if this happens, so. Though these people only talked about these big issues. So.
Okay.
And I have another question for you.
Yes.
And teachers punish the children physically, but
Yeah.
what happens if there is violence amongst the students? Do the teachers interfere?
Yeah, so what happens is the teachers don't notice naturally, so one child has to go to complain. So the teachers come in, they take the children to the management or the principal, and there they are sometimes counseled, but that happens rarely. So they're even then after beating up each other, they go there and get beat up. So same thing happens there. So I don't see the use of it.
Okay. Good. Do you have another question?
No.
Okay. Do you have a question to her?
No.
No. Good. So thank you so much, for sharing with us about what's going on in the schools. Right. So now I would like to invite Ambassador Hans Brattskar to say something to us.
Thank you so much, and good morning to all of you. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with Laura and Jonathan, all the rest of you, to celebrate World Children's Day. And I come from Norway, and we have a very strong belief that every child has a right to an education. But as you know, in many countries around the world, schools are targeted for violent attacks. And attacks on education have terrible consequences for children and for the future of any country. The occurrence of such attacks are a clear call to action for all of us. And this is why Norway and Argentina took the lead on developing what we call the Safe Schools Declaration in 2015. The hope was that by allowing states to make a commitment to protect education, to avoid military use of schools, and to promote education, even in times of conflict, we could improve the situation. And the international community to protect education in conflict and crisis is growing rapidly. Today, 82 countries have endorsed the declaration, up from only 37 3 years ago. This means that a third of all UN member states have endorsed the declaration, and we're very happy with that, but we still have a long ways to go. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Safe Schools Declaration is making a difference for children, students and teachers around the world, because it addresses a problem of immense importance. The Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attacks report, Education Under Attack 2018, documents attacks on education or the military use of schools in 74 countries between 2013 and 2017. But I'm very happy to report to you that we are making progress. First, we have succeeded in building a strong norm for the protection of education in conflict situations. Second, endorsing states are taking action to implement the declaration in their laws and policies. And third, we are seeing an active exchange of best practice between countries in implementing the Safe Schools Declaration. And this is very important because at the end of the day, it's the impact of the declaration on the ground that counts. Thank you so much for your attention.
I want to thank all the presenters, for this very informative and inspiring session. From your presentations, we've learned a lot. I would start from the last presenter, the ambassador, who has reminded us about the importance of having laws in place, to protect the institutions of education. And that, we need to encourage our governments to make sure that the institutions of education are protected from being used by the military as a shield, for those who are fighting. And this is something that all of us can do, especially, I'm thinking of the World Council of Churches that is looking at the priority countries. And these are countries where there's conflict. We are talking about, Syria, Iraq, Israel, Palestine, and Nigeria, South Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Burundi, Colombia, and Ukraine. You are reminding us that, as part of the work of the WCC, as we negotiate peace in these countries, we must also make sure that we are talking about the protection of the education institutions from being used from both sides for military use. So thank you for that comment. And then we've heard about what's going on in the schools, that there is physical violence, but there's also psychological violence. And sometimes, even in those schools, which are supposed to be privileged schools, there are subtle forms of violence happening. And we need to pay attention to these subtle aspects of violence. But then there are also those, which are obvious. We've heard about sexual violence. Sexual violence happens in many schools, even though our presenters, you said it doesn't happen in yours, but it happens in other places. So the issue of awareness of what's going on in the schools is very important, right? We need to make everyone aware that there are these dangers that girls are experiencing in the schools. But I also don't want to limit the sexual violence to girls only, because I know boys also experience sexual violence. We've talked about teachers, being both protectors, but also are part of the bullying system. And that puts a shame to the educational system. I'm a teacher myself by profession. And I feel sad that teachers take advantage of children, but also they turn a blind eye when children are being abused. And this is something that we can also take seriously and make people aware that this is not acceptable. We've heard about physical punishment, that sometimes, even though the law of the country will say no corporal punishment, but it happens in the schools with the permission of the parents. That also puts shame to the parents, who are promoting this kind of violence. And there too, we need awareness that this must come to an end. So thank you so much, for raising this issue.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Isabel Phiri. Now I have a couple of announcements. First of all is that in the next session there will be some people speaking in French, so those who don't speak French are requested to take a headset just before coming back, because there will be simultaneous translation. The other announcement is that you have noticed we didn't schedule any time for a proper Q&A session, question and answers. You are all encouraged to ask any questions if you have them during the coffee break or during our lunch break, directly with the moderators or with speakers. So we will now go into our short coffee break for half an hour. We will resume promptly at 10:40, and please be seated by 10:35. Thank you.